As the first batch of Raspberry Pi 5s have been released to the media for early testing and evaluation, others will have to wait until the end of October. Raspberry Pi 5 is estimated to be from 2 to 3 times faster than Raspberry Pi 4. It has a much more capable graphics core, which now supports graphics and video on 2 monitors. There are also some important differences. C2 port is new available through a new port, but an additional extension board will be needed to connect a solid-state drive or other C2 device. On the contrary, Orange Pi 5 has an inbuilt C2 port on the bottom side of its PCB. The only thing worth mentioning on the bottom side of Raspberry Pi 5 is SD card slot. There are also 2 MIPI ports that can connect to display or a camera, but analog audio output was removed. There are also a number of small white dedicated connectors for speed-controlled ventilator, real-time clock battery and UART. A special 4-pin header is available to support powering over Ethernet. USB 3 is now faster because 2 simultaneous 5 gigabits per second transfers may run in parallel. However, there are also 2 much slower USB 2 ports. The only Ethernet port still supports speeds up to 1 gigabit per second. Raspberry Pi 5 is powered the same way as Raspberry Pi 4 through a dedicated USB-C port, and this way of powering it will probably remain for at least next 10 years. What about the future? The next important development would probably be introduction of Raspberry Pi Compute Module 5. The Compute Module will enable Raspberry Pi 5 use in industrial, hardware research, and multi-computing applications. The original Raspberry Pi 5 only has 1 C2 port, but Compute Module could probably have more. It could also offer more connectors such as analog audio input and output that are now missing. Though initial Raspberry Pi 5 versions have 4 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes of RAM, there may be other versions in the future. But with current printed circuit board, only 1 gigabyte and 2 gigabytes additional versions are possible. A new version of Raspberry Pi 5 printed circuit board will probably be needed to support more RAM, or even more than 1 RAM bank. Let's look into the future. Due to a number of competitive designs, I believe that we won't have to wait for Raspberry Pi 6 longer than 2 or 3 years. Raspberry Pi 6 would probably further speed up the processor with 8 or more processor cores and with an even newer Broadcom graphics code. I believe that analog input-output connector or header might be back with Raspberry Pi 6 because many of us still have powerful analog audio amplifiers that cannot directly connect to digital audio outputs. A power button is also an interesting feature that will probably stay with all forthcoming Raspberry Pi models. Raspberry Pi 6 would probably have an inbuilt C2 port on the bottom side to avoid the need for a separate board. If it comes true, it'd be similar to Orange Pi 5 and definitely needed to run more complex operating system like Microsoft Windows 11 on newer. I admit that my previous prediction of Raspberry Pi 6 having 2 SD card slots might have been a bit too ambitious, but I believe that sooner or later a second C2 port would be needed to allow connection of a powerful graphics card that would allow Raspberry Pi to enter the world of computer gaming. What about Raspberry Pi 7? It is always hard to predict the future, but it would surely add functionalities that we might have been missing at Raspberry Pi 6, while further increasing its processing and graphics power. The number of processor cores might be comparable to today's Apple Minis, and there might be more than 1 graphics core. It would probably also need a specialized artificial intelligence processing core that would be crucial in many research and development projects as well as for industry robot controllers. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, press like and subscribe buttons to enable creation of more videos like this one.